All right, so I've been giving this presentation several times at several different work camps over the past year. I did Grand Rapids, Saratoga, Providence, St. Louis last weekend, and now I'm doing here at Dayton. This presentation, this is the original title. You could read into that whatever you want. But initially, I talked a lot about how do we use WordPress to save taxpayer money in our public school districts. And I'll touch on that a little bit in the slides. Who am I? Well, I've been doing this stuff a really long time. I pioneered the blog format in the late 90s. I had a popular weblog called CamWorld that I wrote 97 through about 2004. At one point I had several 100,000 people a month hitting my site. But these days I'm senior manager of website technology at Newark Public Schools. We're the largest public school district in New Jersey, state of New Jersey. About 40,000 students. This is my old CamWorld blog that's no longer active, but this is some street cred. I'm sorry I invented the blog role. It was actually he came up with the concept of linking to other blogs, if you can imagine that, late 90s. Old school web guy. I've worked with a lot of different companies. I've done big projects for all these companies. The Apache Software Foundation, I did a lot of work with them. I've also run the online components of presidential campaigns. I worked for Wesley Clark in 2004. I worked for John Kerry. I also did a lot of work for the U.S. Army and the World Economic Forum, which is a large global nonprofit that runs the Davos conference every year. However, all of those projects were not on WordPress. So somewhere around 2004, I was at the open source conference in Portland, Oregon, and this kid named Matt comes up to me and he's like, I just wanted to introduce myself to you. You're Cameron Barrett, right? I said, yeah. He said, I just want to shake your hand. I've been reading your blog for 10 years or something like that. And this was Matt in 2004, back when he wanted to meet me because I was, big blogger guy. And now he's running Automatic and doing an amazing job. I used to do a lot of work in Drupal, and I don't do anymore because, well, it's really expensive. I used to do a lot of work in .NET, and I don't do that anymore because it's even more expensive, and it's nightmarish. I don't recommend it to anybody. Here's an example. We spent $1 million in development time building this community website for the Army Board of Generals, and we built it on .NET, and 6 months later, they were like, nah, we don't need it. Project canceled. Taxpayer money out the window. Well, that sums up my feelings on that. So, we're here to talk about schools, right? How can I take all of the knowledge and expertise that I have building online communities, building corporate websites, building nonprofit websites? How can we apply that to our public school districts? Oh, wait, one more thing about me, a little bit more. My parents were school teachers for the American government. I grew up in military bases. Places like Pongo Pongo, American Samoa, and Northern England. This is actually a top secret military base in Northern England that you won't find on maps.
Not anymore, it's not top secret.
Well, it's not top secret anymore because they turned it over to the RAF, Royal Air Force. So these white globes are actually covers for satellite dishes. So a lot of the over-the-air communication that happens in Europe goes through this base. But I'm not a teacher. I didn't follow my parents into the school teaching field. I went into technology, and I decided that I wanted to use the skills that I have and solve these technology problems in our public schools. Let me talk about this for a second. There's 14,000 public school districts in the US. They all have websites. Well, there's a few that don't. I've identified a couple that don't, but 99% of them have websites. Oh wait, correction. Not all of them. Most of them have crappy websites and use this font. They use Comic Sans, and it's like, well, okay. They're just not very good websites. They look like this, a wall of text. Who wants to read all that text? Who wants to, look all this terrible, like this thing? Just terrible. This is actually our old website from about 5 years ago. Just not very modern. Oh, This was on top of a vendor-controlled platform, software as a service. Every one of these red boxes is a flash file. And this was just last year. I'm like, I looked at this thing and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Those are flash files? You're rendering text inside a flash file that reads a template off a text file? I was like, this is nuts. This is the kind of system, software as a service, that these vendors have been selling to school districts around the country and charging a premium for it. I came in and I said, this is crazy. You're spending thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on horrible proprietary software as a service solutions for school districts. And they're getting away with it because most of the people in the school districts, they're not technologists. It's not the school's fault, right? It's not the district's fault. The schools are being sold these, I like this phrase, crappy closed source vendor controlled, horribly, barely working, confusing user interface software as a service solutions. That's what they're being sold, and they're eating it right up because they don't know any better. The school sites, they're just not updated frequently enough. The content's stale. And when you talk to the people who are in charge of the website and the content of these schools, you ask them, why aren't you updating your website? And they're like, well, it's too hard. The interface, the admin interface sucks. It's too hard. I have to remember a different password. You know, it comes with bad templates, which equals bad design. You know, we have this clip art media problem. Remember old version? Microsoft Word now is a lot better than it was, but a lot of schools are running Microsoft Word 2008, which comes with a horrendous clip art library. I mean, it's horrible. But they don't know any better. They don't know how to Google. They don't know how to Google and find a better icon. So they use what's given to them as in form of Microsoft Word. I call this bad clip art media. You know, these site templates that they're given from these software as a service vendors, you know, they're bad navigation. It's confusing. The information architecture is all over the place because it was designed for one school district, then shoehorned onto a different district that may not be structured the same way. It's just horrible solutions. You go into the school districts and you talk to the technologists, and they say, well, this vendor solution is closed source. I could easily fix these problems, but I don't have access to the source code. I'm locked out. I don't have admin access. I don't have source code control. One of the vendors that I replaced, I was trying to load like a jQuery map panning thing in the district, and I couldn't get it to work. And I realized, well, it's because I had to load a newer version of jQuery than what they were loading in their template system. But when I went into the head of the template head of their system, I didn't have access to replace the version of jQuery they're loading. And I couldn't just load a newer version on top. But they were locking me out of even editing what's in the head of the document. It was horrible. Like it was from jQuery from 2007. Antiquated system, just didn't work. I'm going to cover this, and I'm going to try to go fast over this because it's really complicated. But most of our school districts are paid for with taxpayer money, and it's mostly property taxes that pay for school districts. But there's also federal E-rate money that pays for technology in school districts. And E-rate money is, you know how when you pay your phone bill, you have these miscellaneous fees that you pay to Universal Services Fund? Well, the USF actually collects that money. It's around $2 or $3 billion a year. And they give it to the FCC, which then gives it to the E-rate program, which public schools are then allowed to apply for federal money to pay for networking switches, internet access, websites, and that kind of, all the technology in a school district. It's free money to the schools. It's free. You just have to apply for it. However, this E-rate money for website hosting and website content management systems is no longer eligible in the E-rate system. You can't go to the federal government and say, I need $15,000 to pay for my website hosting for 2015. It's not an eligible service anymore. What this means is that these districts who are locked into these vendor solutions are going to start looking around for better, cheaper, open source solutions that they have to pay for out of their regular budget, not their federal grant money budget, E-rate money. They have to pay for it out of their regular budget. So the vendors are either going to have to become way cheaper and way better, or schools will have to find a better solution that's less expensive. This is the solution right here. 14,000 public school districts in this country need to move to WordPress. How do we do that? Well, are the local WordPress experts in your community. You guys need to get involved in your school districts, go talk to them, get involved in the technology committee, make recommendations, explain to them, look, WordPress it's not free, but it's low cost. You need to find a local vendor who can be first line of support for a WordPress install. Have your technologists in the schools become acquainted with WordPress, and the problem solves itself. And then you can fire the vendors. You can get rid of these expensive yearly contract fees that these vendors have been collecting year after year after year. It's your taxpayer dollars. It's not just the property taxes, it's all the money you're paying for through the Universal Services Fund. It's been 20 years of this. Yeah.
What have you found are some of the price ranges for these vendors, these SaaS services?
I'm going to walk through a case study and I'll
Yeah.
show you, but it's anywhere from a district of around 6 schools, 3,000 students, anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 a year.
Okay.
A district of like Newark, which is 40,000 students, we're paying anywhere from 60 to 150. A school district like San Diego district, huge, they're paying upwards of $250,000 to $300,000 a year just for website hosting and just for the CMS access, the content management system. It's a lot of money because they were scaling it up wrong. The vendors were scaling it wrong. It's just they're collecting it as a cash cow. And then they're taking our taxpayer money and it's being misspent. This is a case study I'm going to walk through. So again, I work for Newark Public Schools. This is my full-time job, and we're 40,000 students, 75 websites. We migrated to WordPress multi-site last summer, and we launched right before school started. We did it in 3 months. This was our upfront development costs. We paid a WordPress development firm $30,000 to do a build-out, including a theme development. We did the design in-house, but they did the theme, they did the install, the configuration, content migration. This is the company we use, Webos Studios. They're one of the better web development companies for WordPress in the country. They're pretty good, they do some good work. This is what we're paying per year for server hosting. So we pay WP Engine $1,200 a month. This is actually going to go down to $600 a month because we were overbought. We had too much capacity on the server, so it's a dedicated managed server. We don't worry about security, they handle it, which is great for school districts. This is 75 sites, so it's pretty big. It's around 25 or 30,000 pages, maybe 100,000 PDF documents. It's pretty big. This is the company we use for hosting, Webos Engine. That's what we're paying a year for server 2, for year 2, 7,200. So we went from 14,400 to 72 after the second year. Content migration. So this is a big deal. When you're talking about a large school district, there's a lot of documents in their website that have to be online legally. And you need to make sure when you do the migration, all these documents are taken into consideration. There's a company, a vendor company I'm not going to mention the name, but their name is somewhere on that screen if you want to identify it. There's a vendor out there that wouldn't give us access to our database. I called up their developers and I said, I just need a MySQL dump, or it was a .NET solution. I said, give me an SQL dump of our data. And they're like, no. So what do you mean? It's our data. It's our data, we own it. But no, can't give it to you. I'm like, why not? Well, they said, well, our database has our schema in it, and our schema is our intellectual property. We can't give it to you. I'm like, wait, okay, I understand the legal argument, but we need our data. And so they refused to give it to me, and I'm like, fine. So I went to our lawyer said, nothing you can do, it's their intellectual property. They're correct, you could derive the schema from the database if they give you a dump. I'm like, well, okay, what can I do? So we wrote this script, an importer script, that basically scrapes the entire website, page by page by page, identifies the content in a structured format, sucks it off the web page, and injects it into WordPress, including the media assets. So it pairs the media assets to the page ID. And then it goes 30,000 pages, 100,000 media files, images, PDF files, Flash files, everything. This was our year 1 cost. We paid $64,000 for year 1. Now, if you look at what we were paying the vendor per year, we were paying them $59,000 a year. Remember, year 1 was more because we had an upfront development cost. Year 2, Look at that, I just saved 50 grand, right? That's a teacher. It's a teacher we don't have to fire because we have more money in our budget to pay them. Year 2, 14.4. 5-year savings, right? Start looking at 5-year, 10-year, how much can we save by moving to an open source solution like WordPress? It goes up. This is just one school district, $150,000. Pay 4 teachers with that money. Now, I haven't done math, but there's 14,000 districts in this country. And if they all move to WordPress, how much money can we save? You can do math. I mean, it varies a lot, but it's millions and millions and millions of taxpayer money, taxpayer dollars that can be spent, that can be saved, which can then be used for things like, hey, let's pay our teachers better, right? Let's get these urban after-school programs in place that have been getting cut because there's no money, because the money's being misspent. Let's get arts and drama back into the schools. Pre-K programs, that's huge in the East Coast right now. Now, by moving to WordPress, we get all the advantages of WordPress. we get all the advantages of fresh, modern, responsive design. So it works on our cell phones, it works on our tablets. Remember that diagram, that screenshot that had all the red boxes on it that was Flash? Imagine what that looked like on an iPhone or a tablet. You can't even navigate it. It's terrible. So this is what the site looks like now, roughly. This is actually a mock. The live site looks somewhat like this, very close to it. It gives us a great menu structure because we can take advantage of WordPress's menu system, which is beautiful. It's the best on the market. Doing this with Drupal or Joomla, much more complicated. But because it's baked into WordPress, we can control menus to our heart's content. Customize the crap out of it. So this is our district site. This is one of our school sites. So we have a parent-child theme relationship going on where every school gets a child theme of the parent and allows us to reset, we have some custom stuff where they can set their school colors, black and yellow for Shabazz. They can change these pictures in the carousel. They can change the widgets that are down below. These widgets down here, they can change those. There's a footer, there's a widget in the footer that we control. So if we need to put district-wide information on every school website, we can control that. It's not just us, right? This is a school district in Utah, Granite Schools. It's actually bigger than us. It's 92 schools. One WordPress developer did this entire thing. It's amazing. This guy's brilliant. His name is Chris something. One guy did this. It's a beautiful website. I recommend going to it. It's graniteschools.org, I think. Beautiful. I love his work. He did a fantastic job. So it's not just Newark who's realized this. It's Granite Schools. San Diego's actually moving to Drupal, interestingly enough. So I wish I'd responded to that RFP, but I didn't see it in time. So this is one of the Utah schools sites. So they have a district site, and then they have different custom templates for the school sites, which is a little different than a parent-child theme. But it's still possible with WordPress. You just have a different theme for every site. Montclair, New Jersey, which is a town not far from where I live, also has moved to WordPress. Now they've just done their high school initially, but they want to move all the other schools to WordPress as well, including the district site. But they need to find the funding to do it. So they replaced an homegrown system that they built with WordPress, and so far the results have been fantastic. We're really happy with it. But with WordPress, it's not just the CMS. It's not just the CMS part of WordPress that we are taking advantage of. We're also taking advantage of the fact that we can build a mobile app very quickly through WordPress. Now we're using, let me talk about this for a second. I'll explain how we did it. So what this basically allows us to do is it allows us to send push notifications to the mobile apps. And one of the problems we have in Newark is it's a very urban district. And one thing you know about urban districts is the parents and the guardians, they change their phone numbers very frequently. They go from one cell phone plan to another, literally like every month. And so a lot of the phone numbers in our Blackboard Connect database, which is the automated phone call when you have a snow day, or like there's an emergency message or something, those phone numbers are just out of date because they don't get updated frequently enough. So we found that something like 30 or 40% of all the phone numbers in our database were going to people who didn't have kids in our district. We're waking these poor schmucks up at 4:30 in the morning, somebody who got the phone number next, and we're like, well, this just doesn't work. We're like, well, fine, what's our solution? Our solution is to build mobile apps and have all of our students and parents install the mobile apps on their device, and the device receives the push notification. And so we've supplemented our automated phone call with automated push messaging, which we do directly from WordPress. I'll explain that in a second. So our initial mobile apps were built through a company called AppPresser, which is a WordPress development subsidiary company, kind of. It's like you can build a mobile app via WordPress with AppPresser. And they actually have a new service, self-service piece called Reactor. So we're actually replacing our native development with the Reactor piece of it, so that we can drive the menus and the push notifications directly from our WordPress admin interface. And we did it for like $1,000. Native mobile application is easily $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 if you're coding natively. But because they've hooked the PhoneGap library up to WordPress and all the hooks are there, you can build this stuff pretty easily. It's not hard at all. If you're a developer, I recommend reading this book. This is a WordPress as an application framework book that came out about a year ago. This talks about how do you build an application with WordPress as opposed to thinking of it just as a blogging engine. So if you start thinking about WordPress as an application framework, you can realize that just the CMS and the blog engine are just two different apps on top of the framework. Just like AppPresser is an application on top of the WordPress framework. And you can take that concept and go in any direction you want. It's building an app on top of WordPress. Read this book if you're a developer. It's a little, very developer-centric, but even if you're not a developer, you pick up some really good, really interesting stuff. What this does, it allows us to develop our own third-party connection, our own apps with third-party connections. So let's say we want to build an app that connects to one of our closed database systems for student data. You know, we have access to that. We can do a direct database call, or we could utilize some kind of private API to connect WordPress to that. And because this is an application framework, we can do it. You know, let's say it's a student information system, like PowerSchool, or what's the other one? There's like 3 or 4 that dominate the entire market. PowerSchool is the one that we use. It's owned by Pearson, which is the biggest educational technology company in the country, in the world actually. They're based in London. But PowerSchool stores all of our student information. So if we wanted to connect WordPress to that, we'd have to write a layer between PowerSchool and the WordPress. We could do it. Just development time, development, you know, funding the development of that. So, but it gives us the power of enterprise systems with the freedom of open source. And then, if you build something and you want to open source it so that other school districts can use it, why not? Sure, it doesn't have to be premium. It doesn't have to be custom just to your school. If another school has the same data structure set up, why not? Open source it. Or sell it as a premium plugin, easily. I threw this in here just because it's very interesting. I don't know if you can read some of the text, it's not very good, but basically every one of these is a different data silo in our school, in our systems. And this is PowerSchool up here. So right now there's no interactivity, there's no two-way directional, there's no two-way data transfer happening between any of these systems. But we could, with a lot of work, we could actually make every one of these systems talk to WordPress through a variety of APIs or database calls. There's no reason why we couldn't. It's just a matter of thinking about WordPress as a layer in there, and then just pushing the data, you know, two-directional, whether it's through JSON or API calls or even a direct database query. But it's a complicated system. So right now, we're using WordPress for just as a CMS for the school sites, but there's so much more you can do with it, and that's why I want you to think beyond just the CMS piece of it. So what am I doing now? Well, I'm still working at Newark, but I'm actually spinning up a startup called K-12 Presser that will do this for school districts. I'm talking to school districts all over the country who have the same exact problem where they don't have the money anymore to pay for this stuff, these expensive vendor solutions, but they need WordPress and they need someone to come in and help them do the content migration, help them spin up WordPress, get them fresh design, fresh themes, custom mobile applications, push through app presser. I'm building this out right now, K-12 presser, and I'm signing up districts right now. I'm talking to a big district in Florida, just called me yesterday, and they're like, help, because their Board of Ed was ready to spend, get this, over 5 years, their Board of Ed was ready to spend $750,000 for a 5-year contract. And the guy, one of the guys who's on the board is a lawyer, and he said, this whole thing got away from me. They reined it back in, called me and said, help, because they don't know how to talk this stuff to their Board of Education members. They don't know how to explain how this open source technology can save taxpayer money. All they're hearing is from the vendors who have a vested interest in selling these year after year after year expensive vendor contracts for software as a service.
Do they ever get freaked out by open source, and that must mean that it can get hacked and it's dangerous, you know?
They
You have to
do
address
because
that a lot.
they do because mostly because the vendors say not to trust it.
I'm sure.
You know, if a district's been using a vendor for 10 years, they're going to trust the vendor. But what they don't understand is that all you have to do is say, look, WordPress powers 24 or 25% of all websites, like every website on the internet. You know, hundreds of millions, even billions of websites now, and WordPress powers 25% of them. A vendor, a technology vendor like a school technology vendor can't even come close to that. The biggest company out there selling this stuff, selling the proprietary systems, has 1,700 school districts on their payroll, on their client list. That's about 1/10, 10% of the market. And so they're raking that money in. It's like a federal money cash cow for them because they've been collecting this E-rate money year after year after year. And I come in and say, look, you can do this for a fraction of the cost by moving to WordPress. And you have to educate them about open source, you have to educate them about it's only as secure as any other system. I mean, even the proprietary systems have security holes if you know what to look for. So one of the ways we deal with security is we host on WP Engine, and we know they run regular security audits, like it's part of their, we pay a premium for it, right? WP Engine is not cheap, but we happily pay the premium hosting, dedicated managed, so we're the only client on that server. So we don't have to share a server space or security flaw with another school district. By using WP Engine, we know that security audits are happening. We know that if something happens or if they see something funny in the logs, they're going to fix it. We're paying them for that. It's not some shared hosting plan where you're one of 3,000 sites on a server. This is what you basically what you get with a lot of shared hosting. And then you can fire your vendors. So what we need to do now is these schools need your help. Right? These schools need you guys to go in and volunteer, be on the technology committees, talk about WordPress, and if they show interest, call me, email me. I'll happily do a conference call with any school district in this country and educate them how to do this in WordPress. And I've been giving this presentation for a year, and every single time I've got people asking me, help, my school district is spending our money wrong. I'm like, well, I'm here to help. Call me, email me, get a hold of me. It's even if you're just helping educate about WordPress, you can, if they've adopted WordPress already, you can still help. You can go in, you can help them, show them how to use the admin interface. Help train the content people. One of the biggest problems is content never gets updated on these school sites. And if you ask why, and the person responsible is like, I already have 6 jobs in this school district. I don't need one more. And this is one of the problems. So the beauty of WordPress is it makes it very easy to update content. So if you do the basic training and somebody sees the value of spending the time of doing it, they don't have to struggle with a crappy software as a service vendor interface. That yet one more thing they have to learn how to do. Once they've used WordPress, they know it. And interestingly enough, when you talk to teachers, they're like, I love WordPress because they're using it for home, or they're using it for a class page, or they're using it because they're a contributing writer somewhere. They already know the interface. So to help them with the training, help them with some design. There's a lot of things you can do just by contributing your knowledge of WordPress to your local district. That's small, I'm not going to do tomorrow. But This is my contact information. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, wherever. Get a hold of me, and I have some time for questions.
What are some challenges as far as once you get that contract, building it out? Do you have to have principals or administrators on board, or do you find a champion or whatever? Or
It depends on who owns the website in your district. So sometimes it's the communications department, which is a lot easier than the IT department. So IT departments tend to like super tight control of everything, and they don't care about what it looks like. They don't care about the functionality. They just, is it up? Is it serving the pages? And if your IT department controls your district website, good luck. You need somebody who has a marketing perspective or a communications perspective in charge of your website. And every district's a little different. Sometimes it's a combination of both departments working on it. Sometimes it's just some super talented person in one department you would never expect who owns the website. And so it's identifying what they're trying to do with it. And normally the principals are on board, but you need to get your superintendent on board, and then make sure your Board of Education is on board. The Board of Ed gets wined and dined a lot by the vendors, so you fight that battle quite a bit. Where the Board of Ed, they're not technologists. They don't know when they're being oversold something that just doesn't work the way it should, because they're not looking at functionality. They're looking at a slick sales presentation.
yeah.
So it's enterprise level sales. It's all about impressions, first impressions, and how many times can I visit the client, right? And these sales cycles for the districts, because they go through RFP process, it's anywhere from 6 to 18 months.
That's what I was going to ask.
It's
What's the
really-
sales cycle?
It's
I bet
really long.
yeah.
It's really long. And so I can start talking to a district today, and this will be not for this upcoming year, but the next year,
Yeah.
because they have to make sure that the money is there, which in the budget, so they have to budget for it. Budgeting happens between January and March of every year. So right now, to the end of March, they're finishing budgeting for the 2015 year, which starts July 1. Fiscal year starts July 1. So if you're spending money, you can't even spend it till July 1st. But you have to start the planning for the spending of that money last year. So and these vendors know that. And so what's happening is a lot of the big enterprise level vendors, they're the only companies that are charging enough to actually support that sales cycle. You gotta pay your salespeople, right? You gotta pay your account managers to go sell this. And it takes numerous visits. I looked at an RFP yesterday, it was 67 pages long. I'm like, are you kidding me? And what's happening is if you look at the substance of your RFP, it's not. You could distill this down to like 3 pages. But what's happening is these vendors are going, oh, let's just make it look thick to be more impressive. Or they'll describe the same thing 6 times with different language. And if you're not a technologist, you're reading through this, go, oh, looks great, but you're not really evaluating it, for a functional perspective. It's actually a common sales tool, a sales technique for enterprise. I used to work for enterprise sales. I know the tricks. I know what these salespeople do, and I get it. That's just how business works. But the enemy of those people is open source, because open source can come in and 1/10 of the cost. If not, usually if I come in and I say, I can cut the budget in half. I can cut your operating budget in half, your website operating budget in half for year 1. Year 2, I can cut it in half again. Just by using open source tools like WordPress. And that gets their attention, because the vendors don't like hearing that, of course, because it's their cash cow that's going away. But the people who are running the budgets in the districts do like to hear that, because everybody's trying to cut budgets everywhere. It's a real problem in this country right now. Any more questions? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.